welcome to everyone joining us for another MassMedic virtual program. I'm Rachel Robinson, Vice President at MassMedic, and we are absolutely thrilled to have you here for what I know is going to be a really interesting program. So many of you know we've actually kicked off in the last few months a digital health partnerships program with Goodwin, who's an excellent partner of ours. And what we've been doing is a series of 4 virtual sessions on digital health. So if you missed the first one, you can absolutely access that on the MassMedic Vimeo page. And when I send out the video recording of this program, I'll include that so you can keep up to date. But we will be doing 2 more programs. So if this is an interesting topic for you, I encourage you to keep tabs on that. This is definitely something that you don't want to miss. And I know there's going to be a ton of interesting information, as I said. So before I turn things over to Bob and Jill, I want to say thank you to both of them for joining us for this. You know, we thrive on putting together wonderful content like what you're going to get today, and we absolutely could not do that without fantastic speakers. So just a big shout out to both of them for being willing to talk about the ins and outs of digital health partnerships. And honestly, I'm excited to hear what it was like to work with Apple. So this should be an interesting one for me too. As I said, if you have questions, please utilize the Q&A chat button at the bottom. We will be recording the session, so we will be sending that out to everyone afterwards, as I said. But I think without any further ado, I will turn things over to Bob and Jill to kick things off. Oh, Bob, you are muted.
I promised myself I wouldn't do that. So thanks, Rachel. Really appreciate you guys having us. And we're really excited to be here too. And just by way of background, my name is Bob Crawford. I'm a partner at Goodwin Proctor in their Boston office. I practice in our life sciences transactions practice. I've been with Goodwin for about 21 years, and I've spent most of my time now doing what we call strategic alliance and partnering. So collaborations, some mergers and acquisitions, joint ventures, development arrangements, primarily with pharmaceutical companies. And over the last few years, that has meant working on behalf of pharmaceutical companies, partnering with medtech and data and other sort of digital health early stage companies to merge those products. And that's been very exciting. And also with us is Jill Applebaum from J&J.
Thanks, Bob, and thanks, Rachel. Really excited to be here as well. By way of quick background on myself, I've been at J&J now for 4 years, and I lead our BD and partnership efforts out of J&J's health technology team. Prior to joining J&J, my background is more on the digital and technology side. So I spent the early part of my career working at Google, along with other digital startups, and more recently co-founded an e-commerce direct-to-consumer startup just before joining J&J. So my time at J&J has been my first experience in healthcare, and has been spending much of that focusing on digital health partnerships, and excited to chat more today.
Thanks, Jill. And I should have mentioned, I guess, it seems like a lifetime ago, but before law school, I was a software developer. And I spent 8 years working for the Gillette company in Boston, developing logistics and operational software solutions for them. So that sort of helped fuel my interest and love of tech. It does seem like a lifetime ago, though. So here, there's no doubt that what we're now experiencing, right, major acceleration in digital health investments and partnerships over the last couple of years. We've seen many life science companies struggle with diminished returns in the effectiveness of their traditional product development and promotional models. But we've seen other life science companies, including large pharma companies, pioneer efforts to develop new clinical and commercial models. But at the same time, we've seen the disparity between the patient experience in healthcare and the consumer experience in other industries, right, such as retail, tech, even financial services, is sort of outpaced healthcare in sort of access for consumers, right? Healthcare has traditionally lagged behind almost everybody in providing consumer access, convenience, transparency, and control over their information and data the way other industries typically do. And that's sort of precisely why we're here, right? It's digital health has that potential to continue to play a significant role. And this disparity is driving the evolution of healthcare systems, right? As each sector faces pressure to empower the patient. And so during our session today, we'll talk with Jill about J&J's digital health partnering strategy generally, and then we'll dive into what we believe is some important aspects of their groundbreaking partnership with Apple called Hardline. And so with that, Jill, maybe I thought we'd start a little bit, at a high level and give folks an idea about J&J's commitment to innovation in digital health. And so if you could give us a little bit about, what's the strategy and what's the approach generally at J&J?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, more, holistically, I think innovation is definitely in the lifeblood of the company at J&J. And so across the organization, folks are incentivized to constantly keep innovation and innovation pipeline top of mind. And organizationally, we also have specific teams and structures in place that are solely focused there. And so there's a broad J&J innovation umbrella under which the team that I'm part of sits that really focuses on innovation across a number of different levels and has a very collaborative approach to innovation, with the realization that, good ideas come from anywhere, come internally from J&J, come externally, come from our patients and providers and other stakeholders. And so that's really the approach that we take is open-mindedness, collaboration, and trying to seek ideas from multiple different sources. And so within J&J's broader innovation strategy, there's several different structures in place in terms of how we actually pursue innovation. Folks may be familiar with actual innovation centers that J&J has set up, one of which is in Boston, and there's others in different life sciences hubs around the world that have teams on the ground that really sort of scout and source innovation from a life sciences perspective. We have other incubation models and investment models, and most recently under that umbrella is health tech, which is the team that I'm part of, which is squarely focused on digital health innovation.
And how does that, I guess, from an organizational perspective, how does that interact with BD generally?
Yeah, so I can share a little bit more just about the team and kind of get into then how we interact with BD. So our team's mandate and mission is to really help drive digital transformation across J&J. We've been around now for about 5 years, and the formation of the team really came from direction from J&J leadership that as the world is changing and digital continues to disrupt all industries, healthcare included, we want to ensure that we're equipping ourselves to think about how different needs are changing and how to better address those needs through digital. And so our team was formed. Fast forward to today, we are now a group of 25 people based in San Francisco, and we're not solely focused on external innovation. And so to answer your question, Bob, our team interacts very collaboratively internally with J&J's BD organizations across J&J's sectors, consumer health, medical devices, and pharma. Each of those organizations have their respective BD teams that are very focused on sector-based opportunities. Our team, in contrast, focuses primarily on digital health, but also through the lens of build, buy, or partner opportunities. And so within our team, we also have, in addition to BD, we have a product development team, software engineering, strategy, and when a strategy lends itself to an external innovation opportunity or BD opportunity, depending on how that opportunity looks or who the companies are that we're going to work with, we then collaborate very closely with the J&J sector BD teams to execute on those, with the key difference of our team being very squarely focused on working with big tech companies as well as digital and digital health companies through a number of different transaction types, including strategic partnerships and everything in between.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's important, and I really was hoping that you would highlight that interfacing, right? That it's a two-way street, right? And it's not just a few web developers tucked in a back room somewhere, innovating, right? It really is part of the fabric of the organization, right? It has executive support. In order to be successful at digital partnerships, it needs to be structured in a way that you feel empowered and you have all the opportunity. And then it is sort of wove part of the fabric of BD, and those opportunities all get considered. I guess and when those opportunities come up, I guess how are those opportunities evaluated? I guess what are the pros and cons, right? So now we're focused on digital partnerships. In your time, what have you seen as the pros and cons of doing a strategic partnership versus either internal development or an acquisition?
Yeah, so by design, our team has structured ourselves and set ourselves up such that we don't have an incoming bias towards a strategic partnership or an acquisition or building a solution internally. We always try to lead with strategy first and really working with the internal business teams at J&J, who really serve as the experts around patient needs and provider needs, to come up with the strategy. And then from there, we'll go through a build by partner analysis to try to determine whether or not whatever we're going to create and how we're going to solve for the strategy is something that's better, lends itself to external innovation, internal innovation, or more oftentimes, as I've seen over my time at J&J, it's a combination, because they're really not mutually exclusive. And so there's several common factors that we think about just going into kind of the trade-offs and pros and cons. I think from a strategic partner perspective, always like to think about, do the capabilities that J&J has plus the capabilities of the external organization and team really serve to drive, a 1 + 1 = 3 type of benefit. Are there companies out there that bring, unique capabilities to really complement what J&J is doing today, where we feel like there's obvious value in collaborating and working together? Some of the common things that we think about just in terms of evaluating this are, how crowded is the landscape? What do the teams look like at these companies that we're looking to work with? Is there sort of partnership infrastructure already in place? And all of those are good considerations for us to evaluate, to sort of think about whether strategic collaboration makes sense. And oftentimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, sometimes we decide that it makes the most sense for us to build internally, and that's because we believe we have the capabilities to do so, or there's other strategic reason. It's always a trade-off around resourcing, time, cost, and very specific to the individual strategy.
Yeah. So I guess I'm sure you've worked on plenty, but maybe you could talk a little bit about whether there's one or two digital health strategic partnerships that you've worked on that you're most excited about, and how you see those altering the trajectory of human health.
Yeah, so it's a really exciting time to be in digital health. There's a lot that's happened just in the past 4 years since I've been at J&J, both driven by the health tech team, but also driven by many other parts of the organization that we get really excited about. So just to share a couple of examples, I think some that come to mind for me that I've been closer to and part of within J&J's med device space. One of the unmet needs and areas of focus that the business team has flagged and socialized with health tech, which is around how we can find opportunities to better educate surgeons through surgical training tools, and do so in a more cost-effective and efficient way. And so our team on health tech partnered up with their team to really try to better understand the space, and they already had been very forward thinking from a digital perspective in the types of opportunities there. And so together we developed a strategy that was really focused around opportunities in virtual reality, with the realization that there's a lot of really exciting work being done externally to J&J that we could leverage. And so one of the partnerships that we helped drive was a 3-way collaboration between J&J, Oculus, which is Facebook's VR arm, and a startup called Oso VR, which helps develop custom VR content. And together have worked to bring to market solutions that can help train surgeons remotely through VR, which has been super exciting. And I think, especially in the past year and a half within the pandemic, has, definitely shined a light on technologies like VR and the importance of being able to innovate around things like surgical training and access. So that's one that's ongoing, and we continue to be really, really excited about. I think on the consumer health space, shifting gears a little bit, one other area that our team spends a lot of time thinking about and strategizing around with J&J is just the changing demands from patients for more direct consumer, personalized and at-home care experiences. And so we've done a lot of work in that space. And most recently, last year, J&J led an investment in 30 Madison, which is one of the leading players in the direct to consumer space. And we just get really excited around the trajectory to provide, more personalized care. I think from a direct to consumer perspective, our thinking has very much evolved to think about the space, not only from the lens of e-commerce opportunities, where there's certainly, obvious emerging trends, but also beyond that, how can we provide better at-home diagnostics, telemedicine, consults, and the like? And so are really excited about the work that 30 Madison is doing there.
It's been phenomenal progress over this last year, right? One benefit, if there's benefits to the COVID pandemic, has just been the accelerated development and of telemedicine, right, and at-home care. We're all sort of watching now with bated breath as these spigots start to get turned slightly off, right, as they scale back the temporary regs. But we're continuing to watch that. Yep,
absolutely. And then what's very near and dear to me, which you had teed up, Bob, is a partnership that we launched with Apple called Heartline. We launched this last year, although have been working on it for the last several years. And Heartline is, in a nutshell, a completely virtual clinical study that is focused around heart health. And it's been super exciting to be part of that and to help develop it and manage it ongoing.
Maybe folks will be interested. I think you had a few slides that go over the Heartline study in the partnership, and we can just run through those a little bit and dive in there.
Yeah, happy to share more here. So how this kind of came about, J&J, within J&J's pharma portfolio, we have a bunch of folks focused on cardiovascular disease and focus specifically around solutions and treatments for AFib, so atrial fibrillation. It's a leading cause of stroke. There are increasing rates of AFib across aging populations. And one of the tricky aspects of AFib is that it often goes undetected. And so in thinking about how we can innovate here from a J&J perspective, our colleagues in our pharma organization got really excited about the first party technology that Apple had developed and the opportunity to drive increased detection there. And so we huddled up with them, we being the health tech team at J&J, along with another team within J&J's R&D organization, to think about how could we think about this space a little bit differently, sort of beyond the typical ways that J&J tries to address this problem. And that's what led us to start chatting with the Apple team and thinking about what we could both do there.
Yes, what were some of, maybe we can go through some of this more, but maybe tell us a little bit about when you were starting those discussions and as they advanced, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced in structuring a partnership like that between, a gigantic pharma company and, a behemoth tech company that typically have different consumers for different products and have completely different operational approaches?
Yeah, so I think there's, not unique to this partnership. I think some common challenges that we've experienced just across the board as we've done more and more in the digital health space is, you alluded to it. I think we're coming from very, very different industries. And so there's just a lot of considerations around how you bring healthcare experiences to life, what all of the considerations are there from a user experience perspective, regulatory privacy perspective, that are very unique to healthcare. And from a technology lens, those considerations are there as well. But again, just coming from a different industry. And so aligning two very large organizations together, coming from very different industries, it took a lot of communication and collaboration and really education on both sides to try to just better understand each other's worlds and what some of the key considerations are if we're going to bring together sort of a shared program. I think this slide sort of illuminates it. When it comes to heart health, both J&J and Apple have done a lot and have a lot of respective unique expertise, but that expertise is very different. J&J's is much more from a life science perspective. Apple's much more from a technology and consumer technology perspective. And so thinking through how do you blend both of those things took a lot of work to get there. But I think what's really exciting is, for me personally, I think this, sort of represents the opportunity around what organizations from the technology side and the healthcare side can do if they come together and try to think about sort of merging the playbooks and bringing new experiences together that can impact patients. So that's one sort of overall theme, I think, around just, key challenges of this work in general that I'm sure folks listening in can relate to as well. I think another, always comes up is just trying to manage sort of speed and timelines to get these things off the ground as quickly as possible. With two large, very complex organizations, there's armies of approvals and rounds of review and all of that good stuff. And so working through that and trying to move as quickly as possible definitely can be challenging as well. I guess
on the one hand, typically the pharma might be perceived as the slower partner here because of that. But Apple is also a large company with lots of layers of approvals, right? So I think in this case, there was alignment and there wasn't somebody waiting around for the other, right? They just both have multiple layers of review and lots of people involved in the process, right? So there was alignment there.
Yeah. And again, not unique to the J&J Apple collaboration, but I think even just getting a handle around sort of organizational structure and how decisions get made on both sides and how approvals get made, I think that's been a big, sort of learning and learning process as well. Our J&J has a more matrixed organizational structure, figuring out, how do we sort of align that with the structure, in this case, around the Apple Health team to make sure that we can move at speed. Those are all things that we had to figure out along the way and have been able to develop together.
So maybe I guess that's sort of a good transition to, perhaps folks in the audience here are contemplating a partnership, on the digital health side, whether they're already on the digital health and looking to work with pharma, but what does it take to actually implement and then operate a partnership like this, right? I know from a scale perspective, it's large, right? But it still requires a commitment from both sides. It's not one or two alliance managers talking every quarter, right? This is a hands-on collaboration. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what it takes to really show devotion and what these two companies have done to show their commitment to this partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that, it's one piece to actually get that, get the deal done, and then another to actually figure out how do we operationalize this and make it successful. And so there's been a couple of, common ingredients, I think, that have gone into that have gotten us to the place where we've gotten here. One of them was really just ensuring, core sponsorship on both sides. So making sure that we had the right level of executive support to actually pursue this type of study, which was going to be new for both the organizations. And so making sure that we had that level of executive sponsorship was really critical. I think the other piece too, and speaking, from the J&J side, of course, is understanding that what we were doing here in digital was not just about leveraging a wearable device or an app in our study. It's really about more of a holistic way of working that we had to think about from an operating model perspective, from a methodology perspective, that was maybe going to feel challenging and different from typical ways of working. But some examples of that were, we had to self-organize on the J&J side to ensure that we had lean teams in place, that we had quick decision-making processes, that we were able to make decisions and pivot very quickly because we had, decision-making and sort of directly responsible individuals assigned to core work streams so that we could actually do that. And so really applying more of like what I would think about as kind of the holistic digital playbook to how we operationalize this has been super important. And I think one of the other big learnings for us too was these things are really challenging to get off the ground, and to the extent that we can get folks together in person. I know it sounds like a simple and kind of obvious suggestion, but that made a tremendous difference. And so our health tech team based in San Francisco, the Apple team, based in the Bay Area, but majority of our J&J colleagues are in the East Coast. And so we weren't able to be, permanently co-located together, but we did try to solve for that through, pre-pandemic, quite a bit of travel back and forth to ensure that the teams could co-locate as often as possible. And then since then, just establishing very regular cadences of meetings, even now, post-study on a weekly basis where we bring the teams together ongoing. But I think having the in-person time to work through things and whiteboard and build relationships, to me, has been one of the biggest contributors to actually being able to get this done.
And on a weekly basis, you don't have to get into too much detail, but again, it's not just one or two alliance managers meeting on a weekly basis. Tell us a little bit about, the various expertise and the various decision makers that are part of those weekly meetings.
Yeah, well, I mean, Heartline's unique in that it's not just a clinical study, nor is it just a digital app. It's sort of a combination of a lot of different things. And so therefore we need different expertise and folks on the line on a weekly basis to be able to sort of represent those different functions. And so we have quite large teams on calls from a weekly basis representing different functional areas. We have product, we have design, we have clinicians, we have marketing folks. And so it's really representative across a bunch of different work streams to make sure that we're all looking at the data together on a regular basis, and folks from the clinical side and folks from the technology side are going to interpret that data differently. And so having those perspectives all on the line is super important. And so you're absolutely right. We haven't, we don't streamline this down to like one alliance manager. I think we found more success in having functional leaders across all of the various work streams come together regularly, and that collaboration, I think, has been super critical.
And it probably shows the devotion on each side, right, to their commitment to the partnership and success, long term.
Exactly. And I think it just also allows us to troubleshoot more quickly. I think it can be, really challenging to have outstanding issues take days and weeks to resolve. And so to the extent that we can make decisions in real time and just ensure the right folks are on the line, yes, it's time intensive from a resource perspective, but again, I think it's the key for us being able to move these things along quickly. And that's tricky to get as well, because I think it's we're not just launching an app or launching a study and then seeing how it goes, which I think it's been very important that we have sort of that dedication, ongoing support from a resources perspective to keep blocking and tackling.
and then maybe, did you want to tell us a little bit more about the study itself and how things are going and, what's next?
Yeah, we can move on to the next slide actually. So the study itself, just to get into a little bit more detail, it's really focused on analyzing the impact of a heart health engagement program, which we've delivered through an iOS app and the Apple Watch on early detection of AFib, and also understanding the potential to improve heart health outcomes, including reducing stroke risk. And so the study itself is ongoing for 2 years. It's kicked off last year in February and is still enrolling participants. And so we've had thousands of participants enroll. We continue to enroll on a daily basis. And the study is now opened up to anyone in the US who's 65 and older with an iPhone. So fairly broad criteria. And the primary focus, again, is around detection of AFib. There's other goals that the teams look at as well in the study, but at its core, it's really focused on heart health. And in terms of how it's going, we've been really excited. I can share more about kind of the experience. Rachel, if you want to flip to the next slide. And just to touch on here, so the way that that folks sign up for Heartline and participate in the study, again, it's completely virtual. And so we have a direct to participant recruitment effort. So unlike traditional studies where we would rely on sites, we go out as J&J and Apple and share more about Heartline and drive people to the App Store to download the app. From the app, users can go through the eligibility criteria, an online consent form, consent to data sharing, a randomization process. And then once they get through all of that, they are sort of on their way to participate. And so how we've set this up is that throughout the app, there's a bunch of different content that users can engage with, focused on heart health and other adjacent areas. Which really gives, we have learned participants in the study something to look forward to and engage in on a regular basis. And so, again, we're reaching a senior population. What we've seen just through the data is that folks are really excited to fill out these surveys, to learn more about how sleep and heart health are related, or nutrition and heart health are related, and are really excited to kind of give back to the research community. The other component of that too is that by participating in all these activities, they can earn points through the app, and then those points can be redeemed for rewards. And so there's sort of a feedback loop and engagement program built in. And I think one of the things that we've been really excited to see is just the positive receptivity of this app experience amongst seniors. And so it's, you can look at the App Store reviews on Heartline. We have a 4.6 star rating and really strong reviews coming through. But I think behind those ratings, I think are the really interesting comments where we're seeing seniors say, especially during the pandemic, this has been a really interesting way for me to engage with my health and to do it at home. It's been fun to participate in the study for the first time. I'm learning a lot. It's inspiring me to get up and move more and engage in my health overall. And so we get super motivated by those comments and feedback, and I think has definitely opened up our minds to sort of the additional unmet needs amongst this population of seniors who are really focused on health and well-being. And I think not the obvious audience you would think about for a digital health solution, but one that we're seeing is really taking to it and engaging with it. And so that's been really exciting as well.
That's great. And I without giving away any particular numbers, because I'm not privy to those, but from what I've read in the public is that this has been truly groundbreaking for being the first full true virtual study, and that the enrollment rates have been really what has blown the industry away here, right? Where with the I'm sure a lot of it has to do with the consumer access and everybody already has an iPhone, but it's been truly phenomenal at the success you guys have had in enrolling patients and getting right to the consumer.
Yeah, it's been exciting. We've been really happy with how enrollment's been going, and but we're learning a lot along the way too. I think the way that we, may typically approach recruiting participants for a study on the J&J side, or the way Apple may typically, approach their respective marketing efforts for traditional consumer products, neither of those would really solve for sort of the need here. And so it's taken, it has taken some trial and error and experimentation, and I think creativity on both sides to sort of come together and think about how do we do this differently. Because again, it's, with the digital health partnership, we do want to sort of pull in the best of both worlds from a digital and healthcare approach. And so there's been a lot of learning that's gone into that, but we have been really excited with the enrollment so far.
That's great. And just switching gears a little bit, but in my experience, structuring, negotiating, implementing the framework for who does what, right? The roles and responsibilities, and then ultimately the rights related to data security, privacy, data use can be particularly challenging, right? In structuring these digital health partnerships, especially where generating data is one of the primary objectives here. So I guess tell us a little bit about how J&J and Apple approached this, and then what challenges you might have faced in operationalizing that framework once it was established.
Yeah, great question. This is something we spent a lot of time thinking about and discussing across teams between J&J and Apple from the very beginning. I think it's something we as J&J focus on with every deal and partnership, not unique to Heartline. But I think one of the aspects of Heartline that I think has allowed us to really align and work closely with Apple is that both companies, J&J and Apple, have very strong ethos when it comes to security and privacy. And so that shared value and alignment is something that we established early on. And then that allowed us to make all of our decisions when it came to the study design and the app experience and the user experience to really have data privacy built in by design. And so having that established up front, I think, was really critical because there are tremendous sensitivities here, and it's very important to both companies to have industry leading standards in place. And so from a technology lens on the Apple side and from a healthcare lens on J&J side, we may be coming at it from different angles, but what was very important to establish was that the underlying principles around why this is so important were the same. And so we were able to align on that and ensure, the data is encrypted, it's stored by a third-party representative, and that there's all of the industry-leading guardrails are in place to make sure that this is core to the program. But I think, having that as a written, stated principle up front in our collaboration was really important.
Yeah, I mean, did both Apple and J&J use a third-party prior to this collaboration for? Because they already have the consumer relationship, they already have usage data and some consumer data around the device itself, and you already have health data from your patients and studies. Were you already leveraging that sort of third-party model, or was that new to this collaboration?
Yeah, so yes, it was for other studies that J&J runs as well. We will typically use a third-party model, and so that was something that was, important to us, also important to Apple, to just ensure that we're keeping all of the participant data secured by a third party, and that, neither party between J&J and Apple would have direct access. So it was a, familiar practice to both organizations, and something that we were able to quickly align on in this case.
Yeah, and one of the points that's typically pretty it takes a while to get through here is negotiating ownership rights and usage rights. And generally speaking, the the ownership of the data. You talk a little bit about that. I mean, I know the answer, but you can talk through what you're able to talk about.
Yeah, I think, without getting into specifics on the actual deal, I think, having an understanding of the data coming out of the study is very important to both companies, and looking at it from different perspectives. And so, again, I think what took time for us to work through together was understanding exactly what data we would be collecting, how that data would be stored, what is interesting to both companies when it comes to analyzing that data from a study outcomes perspective, and taking the time again through these in-person sessions and really focusing there to sort of align on that made the rest of it a lot easier to negotiate and then sort of solidify.
And are you able to talk about whether either of you owned the resulting data, jointly owned? Are you able to talk about that?
Yeah, so the study protocol is sponsored by J&J. So Janssen is the sponsor of the study in collaboration with Apple, and so it's stated in those materials that both companies will have access to the data for analysis. So that's how we structured it, and it was important for both companies to be able to set it up that way.
Great. Yeah, that was one of the audience questions. I guess as the innovation is occurring, and you're primarily focused on this study with this team, but have there been any sort of side benefits or other sort of institutional level benefits that have come out of this that ultimately you'll get to leverage for other trials and other processes within the organization?
Yeah, there are. There's many. I think top of mind for me, where we've been spending a lot of time, is around direct to participant recruitment. So that's an area where, the whole strategy within Heartline is to focus on direct to participant recruitment because it's a decentralized virtual trial. So there's a lot that we've learned there along the way. I think we're building up increasing capabilities on our side around understanding what works, what doesn't, which metrics are most important to look at, which channels have been most effective, and all of that is really good learning for us at J&J that I think can be leveraged cross enterprise. It's not unique to this specific study, but can be broadly applicable and learnings that can be shared across the org in terms of how other teams are thinking about their trial recruitment. So that's one piece that's been really exciting. And I think the other is
willingness to adopt that has been high, as opposed to a sort of a urge to continue, the historical way. Have you seen the real willingness to adopt the new technologies there?
Yeah, we have been. And again, some of it being a forcing function of the pandemic as well, and just the need to innovate. But we have, and I think, what Heartline has shown us is that there are a lot of folks that are interested in seeking out opportunities to participate in research, and even some, non-traditional channels that you might not think of top of mind, like social networks, et cetera, can serve as really effective channels to bring folks into clinical research that maybe otherwise wouldn't have used. So that's been interesting insight. And I think more broadly, we're also learning a lot along the way around how to deliver really delightful consumer experiences to seniors in a study, which is not an easy thing to do. So there's a lot of complexity there in terms of delivering, virtual consent forms, authenticating to share data, and so figuring out sort of where the pain points are there from a user perspective. I think all of those are generalizable learnings that we're capturing along the way.
That's great. So related question from the audience. You mentioned a very large participation pool. Did you notice any trends in participation and user info?
So no. Let's see. We have not noticed any, specific trends that I can share of note from, a demographic perspective or otherwise. We have A lot of that is also due, though, to the fact that the study is ongoing. And so a lot of this data is going to continue to be blinded during the course of the study. So some of those insights might be able to come later. But I think we've been really excited to just see a diverse group of folks coming in from all across the US, and again, coming in from different channels as well. So that's been exciting to see. And I think the other aspect of that too that we've learned is that, again, folks seem to really be excited about the technology. They're enjoying the aspect of having the watch, of wearing the watch, of learning how to do that. Many of the participants in the study who have a watch didn't have a watch previously. And so
is that right? I wondered whether that would be new adoption or not. That's great.
Yeah, new adoption. And so, my own hypothesis, at least, is that that folks that are more, technology minded and sort of eager and excited around the technology itself are really attracted to participate, as well as folks who are really interested in thinking through how they activate their own health and how they contribute to research. So those are some of the common attributes that we're observing. That's
great. I don't know whether, it's another audience question. You can talk about it if you can or not, but do the parties have sort of reach through rights, or put in another way, if either of you were to develop some derivative using the data, perhaps like an algorithm, are there rules in place that you'll get access to those data derivatives and vice versa?
Yeah, so again, I'm not going into the specifics on that, but those definitely are things that we've had to work through and think through together in terms of sort of the interest of both parties and what each party can and cannot do. So there's aspects of that are reflected in the deal, certainly.
A couple about the study itself. Did you advertise the study at all? You or Apple? Was there real advertisement, or was it just the on screen?
Yeah, so this kind of all goes back to our strategy around recruiting participants in. So the ways that we've done that are thinking through, where are the senior population spending a lot of their time, and how can we most effectively reach them? And so, again, social networks have been a really effective way of us doing that. We've also launched into partnerships with other third parties that have large audience bases of adults who are 65 plus, and have struck, three-way agreements and partnerships with them to actually go out and help educate and advertise to their members or their communities about Heartline. And so there's been a lot of work that's been done there to inform the public, both directly from our organization and also through third parties as well.
Is it a US only study at this point?
Yes, today it is. Yep, it's US only.
Are there plans to expand outside the US?
It's something we've thought about. We don't have any plans in place yet, but I think it would be exciting if we could get there.
So around the project itself, can you provide any insight into how J&J budgeted for, allocated funding for this alliance, and any rule of thumb on payback or ROI that's worked for you in your career?
Yeah, so this, again, this is it's a virtual study, so it's not a commercial endeavor from the J&J perspective. So funding really comes from sources that are focused on innovation and R&D. And that's been how we've thought about this. And I think, not speaking specifically to Heartline, but how we think about other digital health opportunities more broadly across the organization. I think, again, one of the exciting things around how J&J has been committed to innovation is we do have this umbrella team in place with dedicated resources and funding and budget specifically for these types of programs, where there, may or may not be a relevant commercial model that's there today, but there certainly is a lot of value there from the perspective of the data, the learnings, the opportunity, and growing a unique user base. And so that's been consistent with how I've thought about it, through other partnerships in my career, and certainly outside of Hardline as well.
How I guess will J&J measure success then on this study?
So the study itself is, there's a lot of ways that we can think about success. I think from a very direct clinical perspective, we'll be looking at the actual outcomes of the study to understand if our hypothesis is proven out in the data in terms of our ability to increase and impact detection of AFib. That's first and foremost the primary goal. It's written into the study protocol as our primary endpoint and what we're squarely focused on. On a day-to-day basis, how do we think about that? One of the important things is ensuring that folks are having a really good experience, that they're actually engaging with the app. So there's a lot of other metrics that we look at that you would expect to look at from any digital endeavor, including things like app engagement, install rates, daily and monthly active users, all of those to help us understand, sort of proxies for overall engagement. But at the end of the day, the success is also factoring in the more core clinical components as well. So as I think about it, there's different sort of bundles of metrics that we look at, and those can be kind of divided out into the more clinical side and the more digital side.
So slightly higher level here, a few folks are asking, does J&J collaborate with early stage companies? And what do those partnerships typically look like?
Yeah, absolutely. We partner with early stage companies all the time. There's a lot more information here on the J&J Innovation website. But just to share a little bit more detail there, there's a bunch of models that we have in place. And so depending on, what the unmet need is, what the strategy is, what the needs of the company are, J&J will partner with early stage companies from a funding perspective, from a collaboration perspective, from an accelerator
roles,
perspective.
Right? Advisory roles sometimes.
Exactly. So there's a lot of different models, and I think it's not a one size fits all solution. We really like to build relationships with companies, connect them with different teams across the organization, and try to come up with what the right collaboration model looks like. But a lot of programs in place to help support early stage innovation.
And I think, Rachel, at the end, maybe when we send out some follow-up info at the end, we can provide some information about the innovation labs, how to get access. There's lots of helpful materials there. So I think a little bit more specific here. I guess somebody's asking that for a young startup who's looking to partner with a company like J&J, do you have any tips on how they can prepare themselves for that?
Yeah, and this is something that we're constantly thinking about and trying to ensure that we're making it as easy as possible for smaller companies to kind of navigate all of the different pathways within J&J. And so the J&J Innovation website is really the best place to start as kind of the hub for innovation. I think getting in touch with the teams through there will then allow us to help figure out how to navigate and make sure that you're connected to the right folks and the right parts of the organization. And usually there's not just one path to go down. And so I think the other thing I noticed that, with companies that I've worked with and early stage companies I've worked with, we often have a bunch of different teams at J&J, talking to them, collaborating them, helping to look at the company and brainstorm together on what the right model will be. And then hopefully together we collaborate and figure out the best path forward. But starting with the J&J Innovation site, I think is the best start to just kick off that process and help us learn more about you and what your goals are.
And I'll say to the person asking that question generally that it's not that dissimilar to where you need to be if you're seeking funding, right? Get your house in order, right? So you start there before you reach out to a partner like J&J, right? Make sure that you formed your entity, You've got your founder contribution agreements in place, and that the work that you've done to date is properly in the company itself. You've got, whether it's 1 employee, 2 employees, right? You've got proper employee assignment of invention agreements in place. If you have contractors or freelancers, that they're properly under contract, right? You have the basics in order, so that when you approach a company like J&J or another partner to do a collaboration, that they don't need to spend time helping you clean up before you start substantively discussing the strategic benefits of the partnership itself. So another question, not about startups, but about how does academia engage generally with J&J in your digital health projects?
Yeah, great question. J&J has deep relationships with academia across so many different initiatives. I think specific to digital health and the programs that I've worked on, we've engaged with academia around support just from a KOL perspective. As we've thought about studies, we've partnered with academia around study sponsorship and advice. In the case of Heartline specifically, we have an external committee of an executive committee of different KOLs from different academic institutions that help provide consult and advice on the study and oversight overall. And so it can take a lot of different forms and fashions, but is an important part of our model, at J&J, but certainly from a digital health perspective too.
Yeah, that's great. Going back, and I actually had a question similar to this myself earlier. Somebody's asking generally about the VR training module collaboration that you're working on. Is the intent, because the partners you talked about were the technology partners, I guess, where does the content come from? Is the aim to be sort of an open source training platform? Who will this be available to? And then are there any plans for it to be more broadly available with aims for sort of an equitable access for training?
Yeah, great question. We're very focused on equitable access for training, and so a lot of this work is sponsored out of the J&J institutes, which help provide surgical training globally. And so this specific partnership with Oculus and Oso VR kicked off last year, and so is continuing to roll out and develop with certainly with plans to scale more broadly as we get further along. But we're still in relatively early stages, but it's been exciting to see the progress that's being made, and with the goal and the hypothesis that VR is the right technology to allow us to be able to scale and reach people more broadly. All right,
but the goal for your collaboration at the moment is for distribution of the J&J training content, not a platform to be used by the public for distributing their own content. That's the stage that we're in today. Yeah. Great. Any more questions? I think we're just about out of time, but this has been phenomenal.
You guys did wonderful with actually hitting right on time. I think you just literally answered every question right at 2:00. So what I will say is any last minute questions you all have, please feel free to shoot them in an email to me. So what we will do is we're going to send out the video of the program. I've gotten Bob and Jill's permission to share their emails with you as well. So if you have further questions, you can feel free to send them to me at rachel@mathmedic.com or directly reach out to Bob and Jill with other stuff. But I would just like to say thank you both for this fantastic program. This was incredibly informative. So thank you both for putting this together.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Jill,
we
Jill
look
carried the
forward
day.
to having you both on more programs like this. And thanks to everyone who stuck with us for the hour. I know you got your time worth. So as for Mass Medic, have a wonderful rest of your day, and we hope to see you all again very soon.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.